I'm now happy to transition over to today's program, where we'll be talking about librarianship in library school. And we have this wonderful panel here with us, and I'm going to pause and allow them to introduce themselves, and then we'll just have a guided conversation around a number of topics that we've identified based on conversations that we tend to have with people who are thinking about library school or recently joined library school. And we want to be sure for everyone attending today that your questions, comments, your thoughts, etc., are also integrated. So the chat is open for everyone, so you can use that. You can also use the Q&A function, and we'll just do our best to be as mindful as possible of what people are curious about talking about. With all that being said, let me jump it over and ask Chloe. Would you like to be the first to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Chloe Westman. My pronouns are she, her. I live outside of Philadelphia. I started my career as a public librarian for the Free Library of Philadelphia, and then I was laid off during COVID. So I moved into doing digital asset management for corporations. It's a great field that I think incorporates a lot of the skill set that we learn in library school or that we learn hands-on being a more traditional public or education librarian. And I was hoping to use this panel today to answer some questions about the non-traditional library roles that can be taken with an LIS.
My name is Olivia Radbill. I am an adult services and local history librarian. I work with a public library, so it's a little interesting. I am based in California, because my job encompasses public librarianship, but I do archiving within my position. I'm also an instructor with Louisiana State University's master program, and I also teach at Pasadena City College for their library certificate program. I'm originally from the East Coast and have moved over to the West Coast. My first professional full-time position in libraries was in California in literacy services before moving into archiving. And I'll pass it to Rosemary.
Hi, my name is Rosemary Medrano. I am currently the community engagement librarian at Madison Public Library in one of the neighborhood libraries. I have been in this position for just a few months. I moved here from Arizona, where I was a collections manager at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and before that at the Prescott Public Library. So a lot of moving around for work in this field, I think. I Yeah, in my position, I do programming for adults and families. But yeah, I've done a little bit of everything in my career thus far, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to everybody about it.
And then Jemiah, we'll bounce it over to you if you don't mind.
Hello, I'm Jamia Williams, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm assistant librarian at the Eccles Health Sciences Library at the University of Utah. I work remotely. Half our team is in Salt Lake City, Utah, and the other half of us work remotely. So I'm in upstate New York. So that's where I reside, and also co-founder of the podcast Live Voices and founder of the Diversity Fellow blog, where I document my wonderful time being a Black librarian. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you all very much for that. And I'll just reiterate that we're very, very happy to have y'all. We love the variety of perspectives that y'all are going to bring to this. And of course, just to remind everybody that we're all just speaking for ourselves here, where these are all our thoughts. Obviously, if we had a different panel, we would have an entirely different conversation, which means that this is the type of topic that we can do lots of webinars on. And this is the group that we have. So I'm excited to get going with this. And Jamia, let me just start with you, because you indicated interest in this topic. And again, just by a reminder for those of us joining us, we're gathering topics that we tend to hear from people, questions that we've answered, topics that we engage in when we talk to other people, and that when we think about our own life choices. So also with this, how do you choose which school to go to?
I think one of the things to take in consideration is that most job ads are asking for an ALA accredited Master of Library Science degree. So making sure that you pick that, and they do get on the American Library Association's website, they do give a list of those accredited programs. So just understanding that's the reality. So making sure you pick a program that's accredited. Some places don't care about that, but most places do. So that's one thing. Another thing is like taking consideration the modality of the program. For me, I needed an online program because I'm a parent and also a caregiver. So I needed something online because I didn't have the I didn't have, well, I don't want to say luxury, but I needed something accessible for the type of lifestyle that I live. So online, I was looking for just online program, 100% online. And some people, they want in person and some people want hybrid, depending on your life, depending on how you learn best, right? So taking that consideration. But the biggest thing is cost. How much does this program cost? How much is it going to set you back? Because for me, that was a big barrier to even coming into a graduate program. So how much does it cost to apply to the program, was something that I considered. And how much does the program cost altogether? Do I want to take $20,000 in student loan debt? No, I don't. So is there something that's a little bit lesser? Is that, realistic? And then if that cost is a barrier, which it can be, seeing what scholarships are out there to help offset that cost or grants, programs and things like that is definitely helpful. And the last thing I looked in was concerned about and considering was the curriculum, because I knew at first I wanted to go into archives. Also, I knew I wanted to work in the academic library. So what programs are out there that has a strong archival program or a strong academic librarianship program? So those are the things that, that I took in consideration, that you should take in consideration is, those are my thoughts and, of what to look for when looking into a program, because I didn't know like faculty wise, like who was a good faculty member. And I think like once you get to the PhD level, that is something definitely to consider. But the master's program, I feel definitely the curriculum, the cost, the modality, and the accreditation. Is it an accredited program are the things to consider.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of what Jamia said. In my experience, and please, any of the panelists disagree with me if you've had a different experience. In my experience, most places that are hiring you are simply looking for you went to an ALA accredited institution. I haven't seen with the MLIS that there is favor given to certain programs or schools that are considered more prestigious. It really sometimes feels like you're just checking the box. Not that library school isn't important and valuable, and we've all who have gone have gotten a lot out of it. But sometimes I hear from people considering it that they feel they should be going to a school that's considered prestigious or whatever. But I think, like Jamia said, really look at what works best for your life, whether that is it online, what is the cost? Do you learn better in person? Is there a specific sector of library science that you're interested in? Focus more on what would be the best program for you specifically than what you consider the best program to be generally.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you both for that. So it's thinking about which library school to apply to. Then the other step, of course, is like once you get in, like sort of how do you navigate all the things? So to follow that step, another question that we hear a lot about is how do you choose which courses to take, right? And are there any specific courses that might be more helpful if you need to be eventually outside of librarianship, if you need to be library adjacent? So which of those might be more portable than others? And Rosemary, let me go ahead and bounce this over to you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, as Jamia said, like looking at the curriculum that the school offers is really important, and making sure that you are future-proofing yourself as you develop in your career and as the library landscape changes as well. So I think like digital asset management is a huge one. Anything in data and like data science related, like I know a lot of programs don't get too far into that, but a lot of schools are really connected with their like informatics programs. I took like some data visualization, data science for like education. So those kinds of programs I think are really important where like if you're working, if you find a job like in a public library, they might not all apply right then and there. But if you get burnt out after a couple of years and you need a little bit of a break from a public library, then you have something on your resume that and like a skill set that you can fall back on to look for something outside of your immediate career path. I think also there are some programs that a lot of schools just like don't offer or are taking away. So like digital humanities is one of those things where when I started my library school program, they did offer it, but by the time I was through my first semester, my first year, those courses started to go away, which is really unfortunate. So just I guess just looking at what your school that you're looking at is known for, and what they're going to offer in your time there.
Yeah, perfect. And Chloe, I know you have a lot of thoughts about using
I have a
library
lot.
school training outside of
Yeah, like working outside of the sort of quote unquote traditional librarianship, I think the courses that specifically helped me make a career change to I work in the corporate world, I work in more tech driven spaces. So classes specifically on metadata, organization, taxonomy, those are the things that I found very valuable and helped me make that career change, and that I use the most what I learned in those classes in my career today. Um, I've found a lot of industries are moving to really be tech driven. I mean, it's 2025. It's like everything's very, very tech driven. And so it would do yourself a disservice to not make sure that you're aware of what tech is driving library science and information science going into the future. AI, I know, is a bit scary to a lot of us, myself included, but it's absolutely where a lot of industries are going. I think it's going to touch almost every industry, public library included. And I really recommend being ahead of the curve and learning about that, even if it's a little overwhelming or intimidating to you. I went to Drexel University in Philadelphia for my MLIS, and there the MLIS is part of the School of Information Technology. So there was a lot of cross-listed courses where we did like some light coding, which I was totally out of my element with at the time. But now I'm very glad that I challenged myself and pushed myself to learn a bit of those hard skills.
I just wanted to mention, I know we're talking a lot about like future proofing, and I wanted to throw in that, and I'm biased because I'm currently teaching a class on archival theory, but I think the theory-based classes are very important because ultimately what we as professionals, and I think part of what the point of getting a master's degree is understanding why we're doing what we're doing and what fundamentally are the operations of an information center, of a cultural heritage institution, of a public library. And understanding why we're doing what we're doing is one of the biggest parts of how we maintain relevancy and how we build public trust and how we continue in this profession as a whole, getting like a big picture. So I would highly recommend not overlooking the theory-based classes, the humanities-based classes. Someone mentioned digital humanities is great. So theory-based classes, we need to sort of interrogate why we are doing what we are doing and why this profession exists and where we see it in the future, but also where we see it in the present, because we have a lot of, as I'm sure everyone has heard, ongoing issues. So I wouldn't undervalue those classes. I think sometimes people look at them and think, well, this isn't immediately a practical skill, so therefore I should just pass over that. But I would highly consider interrogating that thought process of, well, is this a practicable skill? Is this something that I can immediately put on my resume? Maybe not. Think about why that's your thought process when you're looking at classes. And I hope that's not too convoluted of an answer, but I just wanted to throw that in as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I deeply appreciate that. Oh, I do see that we have a question or two coming in. What we might do is just wait on the questions for now, and then, but we do see them. Please do keep them coming in, and we do appreciate it, and we'll do our best to get to it. What I did want to ask though, just sort of continuing with this thought of picking the program and then navigating the options within that program. Speaking of options, right? Like there's just a lot of different, like librarianship can mean any number of things. Public, special, academic, archives, all these things. So I'm just curious what it is when you're talking to prospective students or even active students, what it is that you talk to them about when they come to you with questions about how to choose a path, like how to think about that. And Jamia, we'll bounce it back over to you if you don't mind to get us started with this.
Yeah, so choosing a path was, I feel like I know that I'm a very reflective person and I'm very cerebral. So I take a lot of time to think about my life. And also, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a parent and I'm a caregiver. So as I got older, I knew I had to be intentional about my next career move because librarianship is my second career. So before I even applied to grad school programs, I shadowed two librarians. One was a school librarian and the other was an archivist. And after both experiences, I was like, yes, this is the career path I want to go on. And I definitely, again, I thought I wanted to do archival work and also teaching research and instruction. But I knew I wanted to work in the academic library. And the reason why I knew I wanted to work in the academic library is because I felt from my experience as an undergrad student that the library was the heart of the school. And if you're in the academy, it should center around research and information. It should be. But as the reality is, I feel like the reality from the implementation of that was a little off from us really supporting our academic libraries, in my opinion. Again, my opinion. So that was what drew me. I wanted to be in an institution an institution that really understood the importance of library work and understanding research. So that is one of the drivers for me to pick academic librarianship. But health sciences librarianship, in a more narrow sense, chose me because that was one of my first positions that I was able to land was in the health sciences library. And once I got there, I was like, oh yes, this is the lane for me, because that was before becoming a librarian, that was one of the careers I was considering. One of the careers I was considering was nursing, because I was a case manager and I took a lot of my clients on their appointments and helped them with, medications and things like that. So I was like, okay, so the next career trajectory might be nursing. I did that and I'm like, it didn't fit. So I felt like this was a mesh up of my worlds. So nursing and librarianship coming together. So I didn't have to be at the bedside, but I was supporting those at the bedside or those that were going to be at the bedside. So it opened my world and opened my mind, to the possibilities of health sciences librarianship. And so that's how I fell into health sciences librarianship, narrowly, but it is, in my opinion, a mesh up of academic and special, because we do, for the most part, support those on the academic side and the clinical side, because most health sciences libraries are in a medical center or work with medical centers. So that is why, I picked it. And it just led to opening my eyes to so many things that I didn't know librarianship was all about, which I will talk about later. So Thank you.
Thank you for that. Olivia, you indicated interest in this topic, so let me bounce it to you.
Yes. So when I did my graduate degree, I focused on archives. That was my primary interest. I interned at a historical society. I volunteered at a special collection library. What I want to say is do what you want, pursue what interests you. A lot of students I come across kind of already have something that they're sort of interested in and leaning toward, but know how to market your skills. And I'm sure Chloe would agree, and know how to sell them to other positions and be open. So, my educational background and my internships and my apprenticeships were all history archives based. And my first full time position was as a literacy services librarian. So, when I got my master's degree, was just applying to anywhere that was hiring a full-time position because I needed health insurance, and that's what it came down to. Um, and what I did was look at, okay, so I'm in archives, I am helping people with research, it's one-on-one. We're using a lot of decoding document skills. We're using a lot of investigating written resources. And so that was what I used to sell myself to the literacy services position. And in that position, I worked with mostly elementary schoolers. I ran an ESL program for adults, but we primarily did class visits and did individual one-on-one sessions for kids that were below grade level in reading. Um, and through that position, I learned a lot. And because I had a background in archives, they had a museum that was it was a little neglected, and they put me in charge of running that museum. So I got curatorial experience. It was a small local museum. And from that experience, I was able to get my current position as a local history librarian. So it was not a direct path. So maintain a sense of like openness. You might have to shift that way. I spent a year and a half as a literacy services librarian I pursued before I pursued archives in the way I wanted to. So that's why I wanted to mention this question and kind of go through that is it's not always a direct path. Know how to sell your skills that you've gained in whatever field you're kind of drawn to. And you may find that in doing so, you find another pathway. I found that I was very interested in working with kids, and I really, really enjoyed that part of my job. And so now I sort of incorporate that into my local history programming, is doing local history zines with our teen volunteers, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Olivia said. You kind of have to let the path find you. I think if you're too rigid, like I want to do exactly this type of work, you might have trouble just because I think we're all aware. There's always a lot of chatter about like the job market is oversaturated for librarians. So it's really helpful to find your unique niche and follow it. I'll say what drew me to librarianship originally is I've kind of always had a lifelong need to organize things and to like imply a method of organization onto unorganized things. And it seemed that librarianship was the field for me because of that skill and that passion, honestly. Um, I think a lot of us tend to kind of romanticize librarianship. I think we all suffer from a little bit of vocational awe, but it's good to realize what the role actually entails. Like Jamia said, it's really helpful to shadow librarians or volunteer at a library because I think a lot of people outside the field, what they think it is not what the day-to-day job actually is. Um, Archiving is like super romanticized, but a lot of the work that we all do can be very tedious. And for me, I really do well with tedious work, but for some people, it drives them crazy. So just an understanding of what actually happens, either by shadowing, volunteering, just talking to people who are in the field. my path evolved. I worked at a public library. I was laid off in June of 2020 because the libraries in Philadelphia were closed. So I was laid off, and I knew a woman who was a librarian at a pharmaceutical company, and she valued librarians. She valued people who had an MLIS because she had gone through that. So she kind of took a chance on me, giving me a job at this pharmaceutical company, helping with their organization of their marketing materials. And for about a year, I kind of fought it. I just did the job, but I was like, no, I'm going to get back to public librarianship. That's what I went to school for. That's what I want to do. I want to be with the public. I want to be helping people directly. But ultimately, I realized that my skill set was really thriving in that kind of behind the scenes organizing a database environment. And to be completely transparent, I realized that my earning potential over my lifetime would be a lot different working in the corporate environment versus working in the public library. And for me personally, I've found that working a 9 to 5 office job has given me the bandwidth to volunteer in my community. I volunteer at a local elementary school in their library. I volunteer with my township's government, and that's given me the sense of personal fulfillment that I think I might have been seeking when I first went into public librarianship.
I think what you see like as a trend in the four of us is that you're also like just not stuck in a certain type of library either. You're gonna develop skills, soft skills, excuse me, or any different skills within the library field at any of these jobs. And like Olivia was saying too, like it's just about how you market yourself to get to that next role, to get to where you want to be. And then also sometimes in my experience, when you get to that role that you think that you want, sometimes it's actually not the right role for you or not the right place for you, and not the right work culture. So you're just gonna take the skills that you get from there and move forward and keep growing in your field.
Yeah, thank y'all all for that. That's really good advice and great insight. And I want to know. I'm sorry, I'm pausing real fast. I don't know if Zoom is filtering out my plug. I want to know if we can just. I like the momentum from everything y'all were talking about. So I'll go a little bit out of order from some of our notes and just ask, what do you think is the most important skills that you've gotten? And is there anything that you wish you'd focused more on in library school?
Yeah, I can answer. Like I said, organization and logical organization was kind of what has driven me in my career and drove me in to get my degree. And I think that's the one skill that I come back to again and again. Olivia called out earlier that theory classes were really useful to her when she was getting her degree. I think it is very important that when you're doing the organization of things, which we can, as kind of at its core, some of what we do as librarians, think about the reason behind them, think about the audiences that you're serving, think about their needs, think about what best suits them, what you're organizing. So that has been really good for me. I also say a skill that's been really valuable to me. I often work as like the only person who is a librarian or has a library degree. I found it really helpful to think of my job, even when I'm working with data or I'm working with something in a database or in a platform and something that's not so concrete. I found thinking like a traditional librarian has served me well, and it's served me well to think. People sometimes ask me for things that are not in my purview, and they sort of assume that I can do everything. I think that's a problem with librarians. I think we're superheroes. And so it's really served me to think, okay, well, if I was sitting behind the reference desk at the university library, would I treat a student the way that this user at this company is asking me to treat them? No, I would draw these lines and this is how I would help them. So it's been a valuable skill to me to think like a traditional librarian in a non-traditional environment.
I just piggybacking off of that, I think any background in customer service, um, in customer service, but I'll expand on that in a moment, and is essential. I have worked with library staff who this is their first job. Their first job was like entry level librarian, or not librarian, but library position, like as a shelver, aide, or clerk. And it is really, really hard for them if they have never worked in a customer service position before. So we're in this weird space in libraries that I think it's important to recognize, where we're sort of customer service. People look at us and assume we are customer service because we're helping the public, but we, at least I, don't think of our patrons as customers. It's not quite the same relationship. So sometimes I think what I find on the opposite end is people that come into this job who have extensive customer service experience are also used to, quite frankly, taking a lot of abuse from the public and are not as good at setting boundaries with the public. So having a customer service background and those skills are essential. But when you step into the library workplace, what we are also it's important to recognize that we are also encompassing a space that is a professional workspace. And this is kind of something that every library I've worked at has had an issue with fleshing out, as like, where is the line drawn between what is acceptable from patrons and what is not? They're customers, sort of, but they're not really customers, they're patrons. Um, and I guess that goes back to my interest in like theory and why are we doing what we're doing and how does it operate. But I will say it is a lot easier to adjust to library work, especially if you're just looking at entry level positions, if you have a background in customer service. And I find that a lot of students that I talk to who are applying to library positions, like just to get their foot in the door, entry level, um, often don't want to sell their skills as like they worked in fast food or retail or something like that, because they're not sure how that applies here. But you are, especially, and I'm referencing public libraries in particular, you are constantly interacting with people. I get the comment, not from students necessarily, but from the public of, oh, you just read all day. That must be so amazing. I read less now than I have in my entire life since working in libraries. I am with people nonstop, and it can be exhausting. And so you don't have to be a people person, but you have to be a person who is comfortable with interactions. So that is the skill that I always try to highlight, is we are in a sort of weird customer servicey position, but also a professional space that we're encompassing. So yes.
I did not expect so much of my job to need event planning skills. I think that is the one thing that library school left me woefully unprepared for. And that is the bulk of my work now in adult services at a public library. Like I mean, I mostly do programming, and there's a lot that goes into a program. Um, so yeah, I think for that, like I learned on the job. But I mean, if that was more clear when I was in school, like maybe I would take some classes in that. Um, and uh, and I think, but I do think that one of the most valuable classes that I took in library school was on management of a library. And the thing that stands out most from that is about creating policies. I think that what um, maybe didn't come across as strongly in that class was really looking at equity and inclusion when developing policies, and 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 in enforcing policies, and in maybe pushing back against what is already established as policy when you start working in a place. um I think a lot of um that knowledge, you could say you don't agree with the policy, but to actually articulate why, a lot of that is from professional development and out from outside reading that was not covered in library school. And is probably from a lot of academics in women's studies, or in DEI, and so yeah, that was not covered in library school, and I wish that was a skill I had a little bit earlier on to help me articulate why I felt a policy was fair or not. Um, yeah, I'll stop there.
No one else wants to jump in. I just want to jump in really quickly and highlight what Rosemary just said. So I mentioned customer service, but also I, as a public librarian, have learned more about how social services in Southern California work than I have ever known in my life. And that was something that was not covered at all in library school. I know San Jose State has a class that's on like homelessness in libraries. The fact is, if you're in an area with a high unhoused population, if you're in an area that is lower income, you are going to have unhoused people coming into the library. We are the only space that they are basically welcome. And it is very, I mean, this is a whole other presentation, so I'll try not to get into it too much. I have learned so much about how LA homeless services works, the LASA, how sheltering works. I have learned how to look up the number of beds that are available in the area because those are issues that are constantly coming up. Um, I have learned about how to reach a social worker, how to interact with the police in a way that is not going to create, or hopefully not create, an adversarial situation when we are trying to get someone help, because typically, at least in my jurisdiction, you have to contact the police if you want a social worker to come out. There's no other way. And it, I have learned a lot about sort of the social net and where it fails, and how people slip through the cracks, and that is something that you see every day, and that's something that you emotionally have to deal with. So it does take a toll, knowing how I've seen many classes on like trauma informed librarianship. And I think part of that, and those are not classes that I took in school. Those are classes that are like Library Juice Academy professional development courses that I've taken. Um, and I think what those courses a lot of times cover is working with a patron that has trauma. A lot of times, what they don't cover is working as a librarian who has trauma or has experienced something. And so those sort of skills, like, I mean, a lot of librarians like to say we're not social workers. We don't do social work. But the fact is that we are where we are, and we do social work. If you're in a public library, you are doing some level of social work, whether you want to or not. And honestly, that's something to keep in mind. If you are someone who is like, I do not want to deal with the unhoused population at all, I don't want to deal with people who are currently undergoing traumatic situations, who are dealing with potentially addiction issues, mental health issues, even just talking to someone who is house insecure is very stressful because they're stressed out and you're getting stressed out. So that's something that you need to keep in mind when you're looking at what pathway you want to pursue, what skills you need to have. Is the fact of the matter is, we can say we're not social workers all day long, but we need to have a lot of those skills because that's the population that we're serving, and we need to be serving everyone equitably. And so while I'm not saying you need to get a social work degree, um, you need to have an awareness of the social situations that are happening in your area and what people that are coming into your library might be dealing with.
I'd just like to add real quick, I think the two things that have made me a better librarian are the professional development opportunities and the networking I did through the Kaleidoscope Scholarship through the Association of Research Libraries, and going to therapy. Full stop has made me a better librarian.
Thank you all for that. 2 big thumbs up for therapy in general. What I'm gonna do now, just to be time conscious, is jump over to one last question for everybody. And this is the hardest question, so you know you're at the end of the task. We're going to ask you very briefly what advice you would have for somebody who's thinking about going to library school. Right. So in this scenario, somebody says, "Hey, do you think I should go to library school? And if so, how to, what to sort of expect and how this could run, et cetera." But the core is, what advice would you have for somebody who's thinking about going to library school? Again, I'm going to ask each one of you, if you're willing to chime in about this, and then we'll just sort of move through it, because I know that we have some questions that we want to get to, and probably some more coming in soon. So let's see, Jamia, if you don't mind, I'm going to bounce it over to you first.
Okay, I will be succinct with my answer. What I would say is, and I think a lot of the panelists touched on this, is that a lot of what is covered in grad school for library science, information library science, whatever they want to call it this week, is not actually what's happening in the profession. Oftentimes a lot is left out, and I'm still trying to grapple on why that is. I have my own thoughts, but I won't share because I don't want to, be on the list of the faculty members that are amazing and great in these programs. I don't want to beef with them. So, but the reality is a lot of things are left out, and we don't cover like project management skills. We don't cover event planning. We don't cover fundraising. We don't cover, as you stated earlier, people that are dealing with housing issues, etc. So just understand that one of the things I feel is a pillar, a tenant in librarianship is professional development. So don't worry, don't fret. Even though they might not cover it in grad school, do take onus in your professional development. That is, to me, one of the tenets of being a librarian, a good information professional, is your professional development. Continually link into being a lifelong learner, because things are continually evolving and we want to be on top of that. And so, if there's something that wasn't covered that you want to know more about that is happening at your job, tap into that. There are a lot of professional development opportunities out there. Library Juice Press is being one of those things. So Library Juice is being one of those places. So that is that in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Chloe, I'm going to bounce it to you if you don't mind.
Yeah, I would say, sort of piggybacking off of what Jamia said, join associations, organizations, whatever you can find, so that you're talking to other people in the field and other people outside of like the library that you work for, or the school you work for, the system you work for. Make connections with people all over the country, all over the world. Attend webinars, sign up for Library Juice Academy webinars and presentations and panels and courses. All of that stuff that's going to help grow your skill set, that's going to help you network, it's going to help you understand how to do your job better. I'll call out specifically ALA, the American Library Association. There was the Special Library Association that's sort of been disbanding, and it's now, I believe it's intending to merge with ASIS&T, the Association for Information Science and Technology. I know it can be a little daunting because a lot of these organizations have costs and are attending conferences, things like that can feel cost prohibitive. There are a lot of scholarships out there that can help, and it's really worthwhile as you continue your career to be engaged with those types of organizations.
Perfect, perfect. Rosemary, and about you over here.
Um, I I think balancing cost and the quality of the education and the like if a school is going to be challenging for you, I think is very important. And something I think I wish I put a little bit more emphasis on when I was going to library school. Not, my school was fine, but like I do hear about other programs that seem like their courses were more stimulating and prepare their students for their careers in the field of library related jobs a lot more. But yeah, the balance has to be there, because we can't get into crazy debt for library school. I think also like scholarships are so important. And there's so many out there um for uh for different types of libraries and what your goal is. Also for diversifying the library fields. Um and yeah, like a lot of them go with like go with ends up getting very few applicants. So like please apply to scholarships. And another plug for the Kaleidoscope program, like the best experience in my time in library school. And yeah, I think that's all. I think I forgot what the question was, but I think that's all I got.
Well, we were asking for advice for people thinking about going to library school, and I think that was wonderful. And Olivia, let's let you go ahead and finish it.
I'll make it quick. If you are planning on or want to go into a public library or academic library, yes, because they will almost all require an ALA accredited degree. If you want to be a librarian in those, there are other positions, there are other options. There are library tech positions at academic libraries. There are library tech positions at public libraries, and sometimes they are full-time, but I think those positions are fewer and farther between. So yes, if it's going to be academic or public, I know if you are someone who's interested in archives, special collections, sometimes there's a little more leeway if you have experience elsewhere. Um, what I would say is whatever you decide, if you decide to go into library school, go in 100%. Everyone has mentioned scholarships, opportunities, networking, joining professional organizations. There are usually student membership options that are cheaper. Go in 100%. Try to have fun. It's supposed to be fun. This is what we like. And absolutely make the most of it. You're paying a lot of money for it. Make the most of it. Ask your professors questions. If you are not happy with the education that you are receiving, speak up. I think I had one or two courses in grad school that I was not happy with, and I felt like the professor was frankly like very absent and not able to be communicated with. And I didn't say anything because I felt like maybe I wasn't empowered to say anything, or that's the professor, so just shut up and take it. You're allowed to advocate for yourself. You're paying a lot of money, so you can advocate for yourself. I mean, don't be hostile, but certainly be an advocate for yourself. Go in 100% whatever you decide. But I would say if it's academic or public, the fact is that is, at least right now, for most places, the barrier to entry.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all. With the time remaining, we're going to shift into answering some of the questions that have come in to the best of our time ability. And if anyone has more questions, please do feel free. Any attendees today, feel free to use the chat or the Q&A session. I'm going to go ahead and just start with the first ones that came in. This is a question for Chloe. To ask, are you seeing corporate libraries continue to hire librarians/archivists that have a less tech-based skill set, even as the tech side gains prominence.
Yeah. So,
Goals.
yep. So I'll say what I specifically do is something called digital asset management, or DAM. Um, it's a big thing that I think a lot of corporations that have anything that they market, so most corporations that have a marketing department, are really, really investing in DAM. I think it's a huge growing field. And what I have seen is that they are looking for librarians. They are specifically looking for people that either have a library degree or have experience in a library. I don't know how much the ALA accredited program is crucial with DAM the way that it is with other librarian roles, but they really are looking for librarians. Um, I think they honestly they see like librarians as like a little bit novel, and they kind of are like excited to hire someone who is a librarian to come and give them expertise on how to organize and manage the things that they have that are, I mean, I've worked with like billion-dollar corporations, and when you see just like how they name their files and like put their folders together, it's absolutely shocking how disorganized it is. So, yes, they are really jumping at getting librarians. I will say, I think all of my co-panelists have mentioned you have to sell yourself. So make sure that if you're applying for jobs like this or trying to shift into that type of role, make sure you're ready to like go into an interview or talk to someone and sell yourself and sell why what you do is valuable and will be valuable for the company. But Catherine, if you have specific questions about digital asset management, feel free to, you can find me on LinkedIn, or I can put my email in the chat and you can reach out to me and I can answer questions for you about it.
Fantastic. Thank you. This next question is about the affordability of MLIS programs, as some, especially Jamia, you mentioned. And the question is, I think, multi-part. One is a question is whether or not any of us actually know how much our degree was. If you're comfortable saying, as somebody who went through an MLIS program about a decade or I guess over a decade ago, I actually don't remember how much mine was. It was probably a lot though. And also the question is whether or not, that you had anything to help with that, such as graduate assistantships or that.
I can start because I remember it was 10 years ago. I went to St. John's University, which is based in Queens, but they at that time had a hybrid program. It's a private university. It was about $20,000 a year. So I paid $40,000 total. How I paid for it was a family member passed away, and that was how I got the money for grad school, quite frankly. So when people ask, I try to be very transparent. I got grad school money after someone passed away. So I wouldn't suggest that as an option, but that was how I did it. Um, and as far as I know, assistantships or apprenticeships, when I was in grad school, I had two jobs and I was interning. So but I didn't pay rent because I was living with family. I was doing an online program, so it was more flexible. And at that time, I didn't have kids or a social life. So it was a lot easier to manage. I recognize a lot of people that come into the library field are coming in as a second career. So a lot of people that are pursuing their degree do have kids, have families, have other things going on and other commitments. I was very lucky. I did it right after undergrad, like immediately after I finished undergrad. I knew I was going to go into librarianship. That's what I wanted. So I immediately started pursuing my degree. So it worked out for me, and I was very lucky in that respect that I had so much flexibility. And then it took me about 8 months after getting my degree to find a full-time position in a library. But I was willing to relocate. Um, I was very flexible about how much I was getting paid. And again, because I was younger, I didn't have a kid at the time, I wasn't married at the time, I had so much, I could just pack up and leave. So my situation was, I think, a little bit different than a lot of other people in the field.
I graduated 3 years ago from University of Missouri Columbia or Mizzou. I don't remember what the total was, but it was between $600 and $700 per credit. I do remember that. I got a lot of financial assistance through my workplace. I was working at a public library as like basically a I guess a library assistant. Um, and then they paid for a good amount of my schoolwork. They reimbursed me. And then the Association of Research Libraries provided I think I don't know several $1,000s a year for the rest of it. But yeah, I was working full time at a public library. I also had a part time job as a shift lead at a coffee house. I did not do any graduate assistantship. I did it completely remote. I was in Arizona and my program was in Missouri. Um, I do like wish that was an opportunity. Maybe it was. I don't. Maybe I just didn't know about it. But like that sounds like a great experience.
All right. Well, I think that might be a fine place to go ahead and wrap this up since we're almost at the top of the hour. Thank you all very much for being part of this. Thank you all for attending this. Very, very grateful that we can do this type of thing. This event is recorded, so both attendees and presenters, I will be in touch soon when this is available on our YouTube channel. And when I send out that email, there'll be links to our newsletters for library juice and all of that. And this, of course, is an ongoing conversation. Everybody again has different answers to these types of questions. So future webinars on all sorts of things are forthcoming, and I hope everybody keeps an eye out for those. And until then, I hope everyone has a beautiful rest of your day. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you all.